Bismillahi walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum everyone, and peace be with you. Welcome back. Give you guys a second. If you guys want to move up, make room for those who come later. So there's room for them. Okay, so today's topic is on the power of thoughts, and this is a huge topic that we can't discuss all in one session, but what I really want to do here in today's halaqa is just really connect your heart to just the power of redirecting your thoughts, positively redirecting your thoughts. You know, we make so many decisions each day. We make so many choices throughout the day. What are we going to eat? What are we going to, when you're talking to someone, you make a decision of what to say, how to react, your behaviors. So we're always making choices. And something we often miss is that we also choose the thoughts that we're going to have oftentimes. And so, of course, not every thought is a conscious choice, right? But most of the time, we don't realize the power we have to select our thoughts. And that is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the power to do to a certain degree, right? Is that, you have this ability to think about, to reflect on how you're thinking, what you're thinking, and to redirect your thoughts in a direction that serves you. And so the reason why we need to talk about it is because many people, they want inner peace. They want to feel presence. They want to feel mindful. They want to feel like their heart is awakened to the reality that's in front of them. They want to feel nourished by their experiences. They want to feel meaning. They want to feel all these beautiful things in the heart, but then their mind is over here and over there and, and scattered or just thinking about all the things that do not create that kind of home within the heart. So it's like think of your, this heart as like your physical home, and think of your thoughts as all of the things that are existing within the home. If you want to beautify it, you're going to think of, you're going to not just, it's not enough to just have that, right? You want to decorate it. You want to think of, okay, well, who are the people, the people in the home, and how we can beautify ourselves, and internally, right? And also how we can beautify the place, and what you select the furniture you're going to put in there. You select the design, you select so many things, right? Just to beautify that space. But within you is a home that you're always with, and you're always living there. And so we always need to reflect and turn inward and think about, how am I beautifying this heart within me? And the thing is that this word, the Arabic word for heart is qalb, right? And linguistically, it means it's something that turns, or to turn. And this is why we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is muqallib al-qulub, right? The turner of hearts, because, He's the one who turns our hearts. But the nature of the heart is that it's constantly turning. So what makes the heart so fragile? What makes the heart so sensitive? What makes the heart, you wake up with being so present maybe with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to find yourself in the evening, dragging yourself to pray. You're almost forgetful of it. It's how you are directing the heart, because the heart is easily turned. And the mind is one of its most influential or one of the most powerful tools within us that influences its turns, and influences what you feel, and influences your behaviors. So I always say that the heart is the greatest tool that the most powerful and greatest tool that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given each of us. It is the greatest gift He has given within us, that many of us are not connected to that truth. But the mind is also very powerful. And it's so powerful that we cannot just live our lives without actually taking the time to nourish it, to make sure we're taking care of it, to make sure that we're directing our thoughts in the right direction. And this starts with what we absorb. Your five senses, your sight, your hearing, your sense of taste, right? Those are the portals in which you experience the world. Another gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. This power to experience the world through our five senses. But it's through those senses that we are constantly collecting information from the world. The second your eyes lay sight on something, right? That's a piece of information. Your mind just collected that information and organized it, processed it, organized it, and stored it. So I always imagine the brain is like this filing system. Magnificent. When you study the brain, you're just in awe, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, just this creation. And it turns you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, this cannot be created by anything other than the creator, right? But it starts with what we absorb. So people sometimes will say they'll put in effort to try to direct their thoughts, but they won't put in effort to try to also identify what they're absorbing day in and day out. What are we listening to? What are the lyrics that you're listening to day in, day out? What are you watching day in and day out? Who are you surrounded with, right? The people you surround yourself with, that's also information, and how they speak to you, or how the environment that you're in, that affects what you're absorbing day in and day out. The friends you choose, the people you choose. So it starts with, what am I feeding this mind with day in and day out? What do I need to start cutting back, and what does it serve? Because whatever I absorb, eventually it affects this heart. And even if you're aware of it or unaware of it, it affects your heart. Sometimes we just want to snap, come on, we want our heart to feel, we want our heart to be awakened, but we're not conscious of, well, what have I been feeding this inner space with day in and day out? So it starts with that. It's having that sensitivity. And this is why, this is something that's emphasized in our faith. And even, on the day of judgment, like if someone stole, we're not going to be able to speak. The hand itself will speak, right? Because I spoke about this before, our entire body is already in submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is an amana and a trust. Everything we are given, our very hands, but our very senses. So we're going to be asked about that. And it only serves us to be conscious of that truth, because then you think of how am I using my eyes? How am I using my ears? How am I using everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me? And it just increases that sensitivity and that sacredness and that, care for everything that He has given us. So it starts there, right? And then you think about, how can I make sure that I use this mind and I redirect my thoughts in a direction that serves my heart, that serves my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that serves my growth spiritually, mentally, emotionally, right? In all directions. How am I redirecting, my thoughts? And this is essentially, and of course we have to work on our nafs and our egos, because that influences our thoughts as well. But that's another topic for another day. But to be present with our thoughts is essentially what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is that you are present without judgment of what is happening within you, your thoughts, your emotions, whatever comes up in your inner experience, and you're holding a space for them. And you're witnessing them. We say to be mindful is like to play the role of a witness. You're witnessing what is happening. And you're saying, oh, I see that. Okay, that doesn't really help me. I see that. That doesn't really help me. And this is especially helpful when you're engaging in say you want, there are specific habits you want to break, and you keep seeing yourself in the same cycle. Go back to your thoughts. What kind of thinking? How are you thinking about that thing you're trying to change? How are you thinking about yourself? How are you thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because this going back to how we think just influences so many different areas of our lives. But essentially, being mindful is to play the role of the witness, to be a witness to what you're experiencing internally. But there's an even higher level of practice in Islam, and we call that murakaba. Okay? Murakaba is a practice of traditional tasawwuf, and it comes from the word rakab, which means to watch over, to observe, to keep an eye. It's not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of His names is Ar-Raqib, which means the watchful one. This is one of Allah's names. So it comes from the same, it comes from the same derivative, right? Of the word Raqab. And so, sorry, one second. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is another translation of ar-Raqib is the watchful one, the observer, the one who guards, right? The one who sees what is hidden. So mindfulness is to witness what is going on within you, and to hold a space for that, and to try to recognize what is coming up, and without judgment, so you can learn from it, so you can be able to change. Because once you judge whatever you're experiencing, guess what comes up? Your ego comes up, shame comes up. It's like you can't change something that you're being harsh with yourself about. Contrary to what a lot of people do, right? They think that they can hate themselves into the change that they want to experience. But murakaba is not just to witness what is coming up within you. It's not just to be watchful of what is coming up within you. It is to understand, it is to be watchful of the fact that you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watchful over you. So this is a higher level. Because now you're not just present with your thoughts, your emotions, your nafs when it comes up. No, you're now present with the fact that Allah is watchful over you in every single moment. That He is ar-Raqib with you in every single moment. And this is the power of taqwa, and why taqwa, this consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is so powerful in helping us be mindful and be present. Even just take the concept of intentions, right? When you are when you take the time to assess what your intentions are, this is a practice of murakaba, right? Because it helps you practice murakaba and it helps you be present, because guess what you have to do? It's not enough to say, oh, I want to do this thing. No, when you think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what pleases Him, then you are acting from a higher level. You're not acting just from your desires or from what I want, right? It's like what they say nowadays in like the modern self-help world, like you're vibrating higher, right? Or higher vibrations. And so it's this concept of you are now reacting from an elevated space within you. You're not reacting just based, oh, I want this, I'm going to react. Or, I feel like doing this, then I'm going to do it. No. Intention is like, okay, let me assess. Why am I doing this? And how can I connect this to my Creator? And first of all, is this pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So not only now are you present with what you're about to do, but you're present with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as you're about to do it. It completely changes how you're going to do that act, how you're going to do that deed. Try it. One day before you go meet a friend, before you go do a good deed, before you go give charity, be present with not just with why you're doing it, but with the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is close to you and is watchful over you and is observing you as you are doing it. It completely changes your heart as you're doing that deed. It completely changes the nourishment you feel. It completely changes how you walk away from that action. So the reason I mention this when it comes to thoughts is because monitoring your thoughts and choosing the thoughts that serve you has a lot to do with taqwa, right? And has a lot to do with how can I choose what serves my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does Allah like when I keep putting myself down? That's not I need to change this. I need to redirect. Does this help? Does putting myself down and having this self-critical thought, does that really help me go to pray? Does that really help me, be present in prayer? So you think, no, I need to select a better thought. I need to, does this thought about my brother, my sister, does this thought help open my heart towards them? Or does it does it affect my heart towards them? So choosing your thought. This is why is it that we're taught to give our brothers and sisters, 70 excuses. It's not for them. Nowadays with this, a lot of the lingo out there in the self-help world, it would be like, no, you're too soft. Like, don't do that. Don't give somebody 70 excuses. You're like weak for doing that. Right? It's like that's not empowerment. That's like you what is, I don't know, it's like you making excuses for bad behavior or something, right? It'll be kind of packaged like that. And that's why I'm very careful when I absorb self-help material. I make sure that, well, how does this relate to our faith, and how does this really affect my heart? But in the end, when you give 70 excuses, or when you probably won't even have to get to 70. Someone does something and you're like, why did they do that? Or you start thinking ill, or you start thinking like they did that to hurt you. Just redirecting that thought and changing that thought to, well, maybe they were late. Maybe something delayed them. Maybe they were having a bad day. It's not for them. It's for this heart within you. And that's the thing we often miss, is that when you forgive, when you give people the benefit of the doubt, when you give excuses, when you change your thought from something unhelpful to something positive, it only serves you and the capacity that your heart has to feel all the beautiful things that it needs to feel, to be nourished, to derive meaning, for you to actually be awakened to your life. So when you do that, it's not for the other person, it's for you. That's an example of how powerful it is to change our thought from something that doesn't serve us, something that does. And so we need to exert energy, to carefully select our thoughts so that we care for our hearts. And we're able to direct this heart, this qalb, towards what serves us. And as a result of that, our limbs will follow. Because your behaviors cannot change if the heart is not impacted by the information that you have. If information does not become knowledge in the heart, there's no way your limbs will follow through on that knowledge. People move their limbs to act and their behaviors change when their heart is deeply connected to a truth, not just their mind has absorbed it. And so this is why this is so powerful, because when you constantly, and this is what we do in Ramadan, by the way. In Ramadan, people, by the end of Ramadan, a lot of people say, oh, I don't want it to end. In the beginning, it's like people will be having a hard time, right? And by the end of it, it's like, I don't want it to end. Why? Because this home became beautiful. And they experience the sweetness of cultivating that, prioritizing this most sacred space, but also using the mind to serve this sacred space. In Ramadan, you're just more sensitive, right? You're more sensitive to what you absorb. People who always listen to music, sometimes they cut off music, right? Or they make sure they don't watch any shows, or they make sure they just are reading more Quran, or learning more about Islam, or learning more about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or just learning about the things that benefit them. And that presence with the things that are beneficial, it starts to impact the heart. And so you taste the sweetness of what it means to use this mind to direct this heart. And Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah, he says, repel the thought, for if you don't, it becomes an idea. So repel the idea, for if you don't, it will become a desire. So fight against that desire, for if you don't, it will become a determination and a passion. And if you don't repel that, it will become an action. And if you don't replace it with its opposite, it will become a constant habit. So at that point, it will be difficult for you to change it. And Ramadan, that's the power of it. You have 30 days, right? That's why they say it really does help people cultivate new habits and consistent habits that they can take forward. But so here he's making the link between our thoughts and our behaviors and our habits. You see that whole transition? He started off with our thoughts, ideas, emotions, habits. But psychology supports this. A theory that approaches psychological issues through the focus on one's thoughts and behaviors that we use very significantly in psychotherapy is cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And so there's two components in CBT. And CBT is, by the way, is the most commonly used therapy for anxiety disorders. It's effective in the treatment of like panic disorders, phobia, social anxiety, generalized anxiety, and many other conditions. So it's one of the most commonly used therapeutic approaches. And so there's two components to CBT, cognitive and behavioral. Okay. So the cognitive is how cognition or your negative thoughts contribute to how your emotional experience, your fear, your agitations, all the feelings that come up for you. And so cognition, the word cognition is the mental processes of understanding and acquiring knowledge. Okay. So it's not just understanding. Cognition is understanding. It's the process, all the mental processes that happen in your mind that take care of you understanding something and acquiring knowledge about something through your thoughts, through your experiences, and through your senses. Okay. And then there's the behavioral component, which is how you react and function in situations. Okay. This is really important to understand those two parts before I say this part. So the CBT, the belief in CBT is that our thoughts, not the external events, not what happens, not the situation, affects the way we feel. Okay. So it's not necessarily, CBT says that it's not necessarily a situation that's going on that makes you feel that way. It's that middle part, how you're thinking about the situation, that produces how you feel or contributes to how you feel. Of course, there could be many different parts to this, right? But this is meaning that it's not just how you're thinking about the situation. It could be, the nafs plays a role, right? So there's many, but I'm talking specifically right now on how our thoughts contribute to our emotions. And so it says that it's not the situation, but you're in that determines how you feel, but your perception of the situation, how you interpret it, how you think about it. So this is really powerful and really empowering, because where does it turn the power? Outward or inward? Inward. And that's really what helps any human being change, right? Is when they can take their power back. So there's a lot of power to this, because two people, and you see this a lot, right? Two people can go through the same situation, and a person might interpret it one way and another person interprets it one way, and they have two different emotions about it. And so that's not to say that something happens and you can't get hurt. No, that's not what we're saying here. It's that it's just pointing you to the power you have to think differently about a situation and positively and more helpfully redirect your thoughts so that you can experience something different internal, and then you could react in a more positive direction as well. Does that make sense? So when you look at Islam's teachings, a lot of Islam's teachings are centered around us positively redirecting our thoughts, redirecting our mind. And one example is, that giving your friend, your brother, your sister 70 excuses, right? Giving someone 70 excuses. And what that does is that when you think something negatively about somebody, right? And this is why backbiting and slandering is such a great sin in our faith. People, and when we think about this, why is it, right? Why is it that backbiting is so haram? It's because when you backbite, you're impacting the heart of somebody else towards someone else. This whole faith is centered around the purity of our hearts, towards God, towards others, towards ourselves. And if you look at our faith, everything is centered around taking care of this most sacred space within us that impacts everything else. And this is why backbiting is so haram in our faith, because when you might not have any, and again, the qalb turns, right? You might have never thought anything bad about one person. Nothing. You think that's a great person. Somebody comes and says, so-and-so did this, or so-and-so, is like this, or whatever, right? Something negative. Your heart gets impacted by that. That person walks away. They might resolve their matter. But guess what? Now your heart has a different understanding of this person. And you know what? Believe it or not, it might affect how you treat them the next time you see them, whether you are aware of it or not. And so everything that our faith teaches is centered around taking care of our hearts, making sure that it's healthy, making sure that it's awake, making sure that it's connected, making sure that it's present, making sure that it's not carrying things that weigh us down. And so when we engage in like giving somebody the excuse, it's like saying, my heart is more important. Taking care of this heart is more important. And it's what we return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with. On the day of judgment, when we meet Allah, Allah wants us to come back to Him with pure hearts, sound hearts, whole hearts, right? And so it's what we have to take care of every step of the way on our journey. So this is why it's important when we meet people that we don't just, ask about what they're doing, or, when we ask people, how are you? A lot of times it's centered around, what did you accomplish, or what's next, or, ask about people's hearts. Because that's what you carried into this room. That's why I always say thank you, for bringing your heart, because it's the most important part you carry into any room. It's the most important part within you that you carry into any space. You could be there with your you could be there, with your mind, right? But to experience beauty in this world, your heart needs to be present. You could be in the most beautiful, you could go on vacation, be in front of the most beautiful view. But if your heart is not present, you have only seen beauty. You have not experienced beauty. And many people do this. They go to the most beautiful places. They sit with their loved ones, people they love so much. But this heart is not awakened. This heart is not present. So they only are sitting, in front of beauty or seeing beauty, or they're sitting in front of people they love, but they're not experiencing beauty, and they're not experiencing love and connection. And both are about connection, right? Because when you're in front of a great view, it's like, oh, that's beautiful. Okay, the mind knows that, right? The mind understands if something is beautiful. But for the heart to experience beauty, there has to be connection. The heart has to be so present. It's so present with this. It's like the ability to be still, the ability to be content with just connecting to that thing that's right in front of you. And I forgot what led me to say this. I'm going blank. What was the point before I said this?
Like maintaining the purity of your heart.
Oh, thank you. Oh my goodness. Yes, maintaining the purity of your heart. So everything about our faith is centered around this, right? And it's around making sure that we stay connected. And this is, this topic I can go on about it for many sessions, but it really relates a lot to the issues we're facing also in our community. The lack of, people are not feeling connected. And this is such a common theme nowadays. People are lonelier than ever. And this is people who have people around them and people that don't. And it goes back to, we're not taking care of this. We're not putting the effort to be connected to what is in front of us. And as a result, the people who are around us are not feeling that connection. People are going to beautiful places or not, they come back the same. Oh, I need that vacation, self-care, right? I need to do that. They go, come back, nothing has changed internally. They were in front of beauty, did not experience beauty. And so this is why we have to talk about thoughts. And we have to talk about how we care for our mind. And we have to talk about what we allow ourselves to hear. Someone comes to us and starts backbiting. We have a choice in that matter. Please, I really am not comfortable hearing that about this person. Because you have to protect this. And maybe in that moment, you also help that person protect their heart as well. But this is the root of everything in our faith. And I keep saying that because sometimes we miss the point. Sometimes we do our acts of worship and it's almost like, okay, here you go, Allah, I'm doing it. It's like a checklist. But every day, this is your priority. Because this is what allows you to experience your life. And so if you're not taking care of this, your experience of your life is going to be affected. And then another way that Islam teaches us this is the emphasis on having a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the most, well-known statements that we know in our faith is in Hadith Qudsi, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I am what my servant thinks of me. And we say this, right? And we know this. Allah is telling us that I am what my servant thinks of me. Meaning that what you think of me, I will meet you where I will meet you where the quality of your thoughts are, right? So if you think I'm going to answer your dua, he's going to answer your dua. There's no way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're going to think that he's not going to, you're going to think that he's going to answer your dua and he's not going to answer your dua. I always remember when I talk about having a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I always remember this story that Sheikh Hamza Yusuf had shared at a retreat one time. I don't know the source of it, but he had it always stuck with me because it just reminds me of the power of like thinking well of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he shared the story of two men that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that were destined for hell, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting them in hell. And Allah commanded the angels to put these two men into hell. And the one was walking, he already knew that was his destination. He was just like walking. He didn't even look back once. He was like, I know, right? I'm going. And the other one, he kept looking back. He kept looking back. He kept looking back. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the angel, bring this man who keeps looking back. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him, why do you keep looking back? He said, I did not think that you would put me into hell. And because of his good opinion of Allah, Allah put him into heaven, right? But this is just the power of what you think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he quotes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as saying in Hadith Qudsi, those who work for my reward, this is Allah speaking, those who work for my reward should not rely on their works. For even if they try their very best to worship me throughout their lives, they fall short of they fall short of my due worship, seeking honor, bliss, and high ranks in my presence. They should be sure of my mercy and hopeful of my favor, having a good opinion of me. In this case, my beneficence, mercy, forgiveness envelops them. For I am the beneficent, the merciful, as I am called. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said, I swear by Allah besides whom there is no God, that no believer can ever attain the benefits of this world and the world to come except by his good opinion of Allah, his hope, having a good nature, and by abstaining from backbiting. Isn't that interesting that here after he talks about having a good opinion of Allah, that he says abstaining from backbiting? And so this is just to emphasize that having a good opinion and taking care of our opinions and our thoughts impacts the quality of our life. And as the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, in this world and the next. So I will end here and take questions, inshallah.